Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about climate change, climate damage, and of course its recent effects. Of course, we all know that there's going to be another heat wave that's expected in this week alone. If we talk about southern Punjab, we talk about upper Punjab, all of that, the effects of it on over Pakistan as a whole. Of course, our contribution to it, we've been talking about it for a while, and the fact that it seems to, the kind of response that was overall expected overall from countries that can make a difference is unfortunately missing. We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about our water crisis that we've seen as far as, of course, the challenges with Indus canal systems and the threats that overall face Pakistan at this time. The importance of this, of course, cannot be emphasized enough. I have with me Munir Ahmed, who's Executive Director, DevCom, climate change expert also. Thank you for being with us today. We have with us Amman Ullah also, who's Assistant Resident Rep Chief Environment, UNDP. Thank you for being with us today. And we'll also be joined by other guests during the course of the program. Munir sir, we've been talking about climate damage for a while. We've also been talking about its effects. We've also been talking about the fact that, we don't get the kind of response that we would like. Let's talk about the recent state of affairs at this time. We spoke about America and the fact that things can get, unfortunately worse than they are even at this time. What do you say to that?
You are right. It's not only Pakistan, but worldwide the weather will be more harsh, and we will be facing climate branch basically. In the case of Pakistan, even National Disaster Management Authority has given advance alert just yesterday that Pakistan will be facing, some parts of Pakistan will be facing a heat wave just in April. And it's quite alarming that April usually seems to be a spring and pleasant weather in Pakistan, but it's a story way back some years. But in the recent years, we have started facing extreme heat in March and April. Only last year, I think, was quite pleasant weather or like bit moderate weather. But this is quite alarming that South Punjab and some parts of Sindh and some parts of Balochistan will be facing harsh weather it will start next week. So what are the measures that we are taking for those communities, for those areas in Pakistan where there will be harsh weather starting next week? I believe we need to take good measures for heat wave. We need to have cool centers around so that, and we also need to relax the working hours for the labor and those who are working in the farmlands.
We talk about agriculture, and I want to come to that. Let me go to Amman Ullah, and then I'll come back to you. Ji, Amman Ullah, we're talking about agriculture, and of course we are in, there's agri-based economy to an extent. As far as agriculture overall is concerned, don't you feel that, if you talk about southern Punjab, Sindh, with the kind of weather change, the kind of climate damage that is, going to lead to the kind of weather change patterns, what is it going to do to the crops? Again, spring seems to be missing largely from these areas, like Munir Saab said. So what happens?
So, allow me to begin by saying thank you for having me on the show. One correction, I am the former Environment and Climate Change Chief of UNDP. Actually, so coming to agriculture and our water scarcity, as you said, we do say that we are an agriculture country. Being an agriculture country, the Indus remains our sole source for most of the agriculture in, say, Sindh and Punjab, and now lately because of the Pat Feeder Canal parts of Balochistan. So that is how we are. I think we are doing a twofold damage to our agriculture by not looking at our water resources or its conservation. One, we are destroying the very source which gives us water. Climate change is real. We are not looking after our glaciers. There's little we can actually do to keep them from not melting, but we are increasing it. So that is the source of your water. Then when you come down, you look at the delta, and we are slowly killing the Indus at the delta. There is already.
Let me come back to you. I think there's a problem with audio. Let me come back to you. Ji, Munir Sahab, I think overall, if we look at the way things are at this time, the same question to you before we go back to Amman Ullah Sahab. There is, what kind of change do you expect in those areas where, of course, they're agri-based also, and the fact that this change is going to necessitate water shortage. It's going to, and they're going to be needing a lot more water. So what happens?
Of course, there is no substitute to water, and where it is needed, we have to provide water. But in the winter season, we had 61% less rains, and also 50% less snowfall in the northern areas.
Right.
So this is the situation that rain and the snowfall, they are the main source of water in Pakistan. If we don't have enough rain, we don't have enough snowfall, so what we get in the summer season. On the other hand, the concrete jungle that we have grown in our cities and all around, and it is also like has caused damage the absorption of water, and less groundwater is available. Met Office had already said that our dams are below the dead level. So in this situation, we will be facing a lot of issues regarding water, and I really don't know what could be the solution to it, because for example, if you have to provide water to Thailand in Sindh, or like the far-flung areas of Balochistan, so there should be some mechanism, and experts, those who work on water issues, or like development of water.
But when we talk about some mechanism,
yeah.
what is, like you said, what is a substitute for natural rain, or natural, when there's a kind of disruption in the natural weather pattern that we've seen? Let me include Anam Rathor also. She's just joined us. Thank you for being with us. She's an environment and climate change expert. Anam, we're talking about the effects of the change overall in those areas where are Sindh, southern Punjab, where there are large tracts of land, and this kind of weather change can potentially mean loss of livelihoods for a huge number of people, along with, of course, what it can mean for change in crops, and what how that can translate overall in terms of shortages. So is there anything that can be done at this point for that crisis?
Assalamu alaikum. I would like to start by saying that our vulnerability to climate change, I'm talking about Pakistan, is increasing. It's also depends on what we're facing as a country. There's poverty, there's lack of infrastructure, there's gender-based violence, there's social and economic inequalities, and these are not separate from climate change. These structural injustices, they're also weakening our resilience. So the communities that we're talking about that are in southern or western Pakistan, they are vulnerable, and they're already facing all these social and economic injustices. So they're more vulnerable to climate change. So I think we cannot address the climate crisis without first addressing these issues. So it's really important.
So how do we address it? I mean, you know, we were saying that they're more vulnerable. What can be done at this point to address that vulnerability, in your opinion, as far as the government is concerned?
I think it's really important that we talk about a bottom-up approach. We always talk about a top-down approach where some people in power, or the people in power, they make the decisions for people in the community. In my opinion, it's really important to have a governance system where people on the front line, people at the grassroots, they are added, their voices are added, their experiences are taken into account when these big decisions are being made. When we talk about any policy, we talk about any governance system.
You know, when we talk about, like you said, you're saying that, you know, people should, the stakeholders should be taken on board with regard to anything, and that's certainly something that, you know, no one can deny should be done. But the question is, when a government is dealing with the kind of crisis that we see our governments grappling with, shortage of funds globally also, and of course they translate to much more with a country like Pakistan, what can really be done? What are the options open? I want to discuss that for the government. Let me go to Amman Ullah Sahab. Ji, Amman Ullah Sahab, I hope that, you know, you can hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you. Am I audible?
Ji, I can hear you now. So what are the options, in your opinion, that are open to a government that is dealing with a multifaceted crisis on so many levels? I mean, you know, it's not always about what, you know, about there being... Ji, can you hear me? Hello? Ji? No. Like Anam, like I was saying, please continue. So what are the options open? I mean, it's right that we want them to include people who, you know, from the down, you know, to the up, and perhaps that can be done. But the question is, what are the options on the table?
I think right now the options are very less, because even when we talk about climate finance, the international climate finance, that's also shrinking. The space that was, you know, the finance wasn't already as much, was very less than what we wanted, and because when the US is out and a lot of EU countries, they've also, you know, decreased their budget for climate change, so the budget has shrunk, the money has already shrunk. And so it's really important that when we talk about the budget at home, when we talk about, you know, the money that the Pakistan government has, we need to start prioritizing local resilience. You know, we usually talk about big infrastructure, we talk about dams, we talk about canals, but I think right now the focus should be more community driven. It should be, as I said, it should be a bottom up approach. It should be involving communities, it should be empowering them, it should be empowering women farmers and youth. We should not...
When Anam says that they should be empowering women farmers, when she says that they should be about bottom to top, in terms of what does it translate into, in your opinion, when, you know, we empower them with the kind of funds that we have? The question is, we don't have funds at this time. So what do we do? I mean, of course, you know, if your heart's in the right place, the government really wants to do right, I think there's little doubt about that. The question is, what they have to do it within what they have.
Government can do two things.
Right, okay.
First, whatever finances and budgets are available with the federal and the provincial governments, they need to prioritize. I think more funds shall be used on for community resilience, or those are the vulnerable, and I think this is the first thing. And secondly,
I think when those that are climate experts talk about community resilience, I think you need to explain that a little bit. What kind of measures would that?
Community resilience means, like, for example, if they are facing the heat wave, I think funds shall be diverted, as I earlier mentioned, for cooling centers, to provide them more better shelters, or like some medical centers where they can be treated if affected by the heat wave. So these are the two major things. Third is the basic necessities of life, and if we spend more money on it, then certainly it would soothe lives of or like help communities to survive. And secondly, Pakistan government shall also you know, take up the issue of transboundary water, because most of the water is already stolen by our neighbors, and very less come during the over the year, but when there is a lot of water of monsoon and it is diverted to our rivers. So I think there is a need to have transboundary agreements revised for smooth flow of water all the year around.
You think that
so
we can have that kind of revision with, for example, a country like India across the border?
Is
it a possibility?
I think it is possible, but we need to have our more cordial relations with, and I believe, like, if not the strategic ones, at least we need to talk about these issues which hamper the lives of the people.
I want to come back and talk to you and Anam more about whether India is amenable, in your opinion, to take part in these kind of climate conferences. Are they more amenable to this kind of diplomacy, or not at all? Because, you know, that is something that, you know, remains questionable from time to time. But let me include Amman Ullah Sahab again. Ji, Amman Ullah Sahab, can you hear me?
Ji, I can hear you.
Ji, let's, you know, overall, do you think that it's a possibility that, you know, the climate diplomacy that's happening all over the world, do you think a country like India is willing to take part in it and be, you know, more rational with regard to Pakistan on these issues? Because of course it's a huge broad-based issue which involves, you know, our relationship with India, which involves foreign, you know, our relationship with, in terms of, you know, other issues, a host of other issues come within that umbrella. But largely speaking, as far as climate damage is concerned, it seems to know no borders, right?
Okay, thank you. Before going on to respond to this question, let me also touch briefly upon what Anam said. I think one thing that the government of Pakistan can do, the public sector can play a major role, is to activate the local government. You have to take management down to lower tiers, which are closely working with people who are in fact dealing with the issue that we are discussing. We have water users associations, we have local government, and that is a function that should be done by them. I think they can begin by the fact that they educate people. It's very evident now, but we have a lot of deniers of climate change. I think we begin with basic education and then going about and doing water conservation measures. Also, in the same connection, I think Munir Ahmed mentioned it, monsoon is our bane. Now we have a lot of water in a very short period of time, which somehow needs to be tamed. So that can be done by a number of ways. I think there have been discussions on having, say, canals linked to rivers which have less water at that time, say, nature-based solutions like mud dams that can be made, say, in places like Balochistan and even Cholistan. So that's one big resource for which we should be thankful, which we can tame with these very rudimentary kind of measures. And I think that will not only provide more arable land, it will also raise the aquifers, and our groundwater situation will be better. Now, coming to India, I think as far as I know, our use of water is a settled one. Our issue remains when they let off these huge amounts of water during the monsoon. So again, by way of, say, if we can tap the monsoon on our western border, I'm sure there are ways and means of tapping that overflow which comes. So I'm afraid time is now past to renegotiate.
I'll come back to you on that note. Let me go to Munir Ahmed. Munir Ahmed, you think there are ways and means? I mean, we can sit here and talk about, I want to, and you know, we've had this discussion a few times, and we've spoken about climate damage generally also. I want to narrow it down a little bit to things that can be done on the smaller scale and the larger scale. So it's actually beneficial for everyone, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't want to go too much into the generic climate damage because we've spoken about it before. I mean, do you think that there are things that can be done with regard to diplomacy with India, for example, on this issue? Realistically speaking.
Some years back, we started off with the track 2 policy, and it worked quite well. And it was way back, I believe, like it was Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's regime that time, and they very successfully, negotiated with India, and both countries were quite lenient to each other and to facilitate for the people of their countries. I believe such kind of initiatives can also be taken again. But on the other hand, I really may not be having like more hopes during the present regime in India, but still we keep on talking about it. And the international forums, where we go to Conference of Parties or other international forums, we need to engage our Indian counterparts, and somehow we need to keep on talking about people to people things, and for the sake of people, because strategic interests of both countries are quite different. And it is it is everywhere.
It's everywhere.
And the strategic interests are always different.
And it's also so important to realize with regard to this diplomacy with India that it's actually an issue. It is an actual issue that knows no borders. So it doesn't really, these borders, geographical borders, really don't translate in terms of the climate damage that we've seen.
Yeah.
So that's really an issue. Let me go to Anam and then I'll come back to you. Ji, Anam, then, of course, we engage more with India, we try to explain. With regard to, let's move on to the Indus Canal project. Also, again, that involves, a lot of it involves India also. With regard to our Indus Water Treaty, the fact that, again, there is, of course, a blatant unfairness there that happens every year. The suffering that so many of our people, we all continue to suffer because of. We've tried to engage international organizations with regard to that, but it hasn't worked. Is it something that happens, is how much of an engagement do you see in your experience in these weather related, COP conferences also we've seen? Is India an active part of these?
I think India has been an active part of this, and COP is something that all countries of the world, they're there, and because, everyone is suffering from climate change. It's not at a specific country that's suffering more. So I think when we talk about climate change, it's, we don't even use the word climate change anymore. It's climate catastrophes, and the way things are going, it's going to get really bad. We're at 1.3 right now, and we're expected to reach 1.5 degrees in the next decade. And if this is happening at 1.3, we can see what will happen at 1.5 degrees climate rise. So it's really important that this, when talking about diplomacy, when we're talking about, working with India, we have to keep pushing, because we're talking about people's lives, we're talking about people's livelihoods, we're talking about the future of our country, because as an agricultural country, we depend on the environment, we depend on the nature to survive. So it's really important when we think about the future of our country, we have to push that, we have to push for this diplomacy, we have to push for this relationship with India where we can work together, because it's like, I think there's no other option other than that.
Right, fair enough. Let me go back to Amman Ullah Sahab. Amman Ullah Sahab, when we talk about countries like America, for example, we've seen, the latest measures that under Donald Trump are likely to further reduce, because if the US stops participating, then of course the kitty gets much, much smaller. Do you think that there's a chance that the world can rally together for this cause also?
One, you are very true, unfortunately, on the current American government. Their stance on climate change and anything related to the environment is very, very thin. And that is why the sector has already lost in excess of $5-6 billion. I think China may be one. And China in a major way in a couple of years. You've also seen the Europeans, like you have funds coming in, say, from Germany, from Netherlands, from the Norwegians. These are people who use their packets of money that they have in Pakistan on the water sector. So it will dwindle, it will not dwindle, it will just go down abysmally low, but we will have some supporters. And China is seen as a huge supporter. Unfortunately, right now, the quantum of funds that come from China are little, and if there are much, they are in terms of a loan. But we see grants for climate increasing from China.
Right, fair enough. You think that, so in terms of an alternative, do you think that the Chinese can offer us some help or expertise?
They can extend help in terms of expertise, but China believes like their friends and shall use their own resources and their own wisdom, and they stand on their feet. That is more. But maybe in the CPEC phase 2, they will be more. If Pakistan government asks them, and they can invest in water reservoirs or like climate smart agriculture. I believe that it could be done, but overall, if we globally see that the climate financing gap is extending, it's like increasing.
But when we talk about bankable, sustainable projects which are funded by international donors, you think that they are also receding a little bit? You think the international
that's true. But a couple of years back, Korea extended a good project for climate smart agriculture, and if it works out in the couple of years, in the coming years, it would increase our food security. Okay. But I believe we need to do much more. We need to keep on harnessing those partners who we have not harnessed before, the non-conventional partners. And secondly, we need to reduce our dependence on World Bank type or like projects. They have increased already a lot of burden on us. And recently, World Bank approved $300 million for climate projects. If they are used rationally, I believe it would increase more resilience and more, it would help us in many ways. But still, I believe we need to adopt some community-based solutions. We shall go for it, and we need to depend on our local resources.
Right, fair enough. Anam, do you think that, we spoke about China and expanding emissions trading system, that they have expanded further. They have expanded it to new sectors. Do you think things like this can make some difference overall?
I mean, when we talk about climate finance, if you have an emission trading system, carbon market is very emerging right now. It's something I know the government of Pakistan is really interested in, and they just came up with like a policy, and there's a specific person at the Ministry of Climate Change for it as well. So this is something that the government is looking into, but that is a source of finance. But again, what I feel like the gap is still a lot. We really need a lot of money, and we talked about World Bank, we talk about Asian Development Bank, KfW, which is a German bank. All of these banks, the money that they give is mostly loans. So it's concessional loan, it's a low interest loan, but again, it's a loan. And for bankable, and these are for big infrastructure projects. And when we talk about bankable projects, it's really difficult to get that bankable part in an adaptation project. In adaptation, we're trying to stop the floods, so making infrastructures that are going to save lives, but making them bankable is not easy. When we talk about mitigation, it's easier to make a mitigation project bankable, but again, Pakistan produces less than 1% of global emissions, and mitigation is not its priority. It is a really vulnerable country, and its priority is adapting to climate change or the impacts of climate change. So for us, when that bankable aspect, it's difficult for us to make that bankable, so that again is increasing the climate finance gap.
What about countries including China, Indonesia, Brazil, India even, countries that are actually suffering more can actually come together? Do you think that, you know, even if we exclude huge donors or, you know, potential donors or those that can really make a difference, US for example, can that collaborative effort really, you know, do something for this issue?
I think the COP at Marrakesh was a big example of it, when all these countries, these vulnerable countries, came together and they really pushed for the loss and damage fund. Loss and damage fund was, and Pakistan took the lead on it. It was in the works for almost a decade, and where these countries really pushed, the fund was formed. But right now, like I think a few days ago, there was this one of its meeting where they haven't reached the target that was set. You know, countries like Pakistan or these vulnerable countries which are vulnerable to climate change are pushing. They're, you know, they're going to these conferences and our representatives are really pushing for this, but then the funds to them come from the global north. They come from countries like the US or a lot of EU countries. And even if they pledge that we're going to give that money and that money is not coming, there's nothing we can do.
What about the Paris Accord? And of course, a lot of funds from that also didn't really translate. And that is an example or case in point of where we are with regard to pledges that don't really materialize. I want to take Amman Ullah Sahib again. Amman Ullah Sahib, when we talk about things we can do at home, there's, you know, of course, strong regulatory framework, policy stability, restoring investor confidence, and the government is doing all it can at those ends. Do you think that, you know, when we talk about private sector engagement, for example, do you think that, you know, those and more international, you know, partnerships are on the agenda overall, in your opinion?
Directly related to the water sector, I don't think so.
And overall funds in that area are not a priority here.
In the current situation, as Munir and Anam also said before me, there is an abysmal drop, and it continues, and it's been a while, even before the current American government set in. Those funds are going down. But then again, not to sound a pessimist, I think multilateral donors like the Green Climate Fund, we right now have over a $40 or $50 million project basically working on the Indus, on the people around it, on conservation of its water. So we have these initiatives. But if you look at the scale of the issue, $40, $50 million project does not have the answer. It is only when we gear up ourselves, our public sector does that, we demonstrate good practices. Like you say, with the corporate sector, we need to bring in the corporate sector in terms of public-private partnerships. I remember there was a project in Islamabad where with Shell Pakistan, there was an understanding whereby there was a water conservation initiative for their service stations in fuel pumps. Then there was also another municipal kind of an action, a pilot that was related to recycling mosque ablution water. So there are many, many ways of not just international corporate sector, but our own corporate sector being involved with government. They have the money. And I think even small initiatives in their own respective areas, we have the corporate sector spread from Khyber a little thinly, but right down to Karachi. So I think in their own spheres of operation, they can be good pilots to demonstrate conservation.
Okay. Munir sir, what's your take on this? You agree with what Amman Ullah Sahib says? You think that this can actually work if we look at this project overall?
I think besides having like public-private partnerships, there are two more windows that we need to harness upon, and they are like corporate social responsibility funding.
Okay.
There are thousands of companies, national and international and multinational companies in Pakistan, and every company is supposed to spend its CR funding on community-based projects. Unfortunately, there is no regulation about these CSR projects. On the other hand, the charity Pakistan is one of the countries, collect a large amount of charity, but that is spent on, it's the discretion. But I think this funding can also be channelized and regulated in the given circumstances if these two windows are harnessed and corporates are advised and regulated for their such kind of initiatives. They can be translated into more meaningful community based projects. So that would make really a good difference if regulated, and it is linked to the dashboard of PSDP or the provincial development projects. So I think that's how there are many examples from China.
But Munir sir, we talk about, unfortunately I'm also on limited time, but I want to go to Anam with this. Anam, this is whatever Munir sahab is saying and Amman Ullah sahab also, these are great solutions, but in some sense they seem to be at this time long term. We're looking at potential drought, we're looking at this year for example, a huge water shortage, crops. Is there a solution, in terms of some measures that we can take to dilute this kind of damage that seems to be on the horizon, unfortunately?
I think we have to think long term and short term as well, because when we talk about climate change and especially when we talk about just transition, it is a long term goal. We cannot just, if in a just way we want to transition, we have to make plans, we have to make alternate jobs, because when we talk about just transition, it's a way when people are not impacted. We can't just say that, oh, this is banned tomorrow. If we do that, there are like hundreds of people who use that as a source of livelihood, even if that specific thing is polluting to the environment or is causing climate change. But in the long run, but when we just blankly ban something, people get impacted, their jobs get impacted. So when we talk about just transition, it's really important to have a long-term goal. But for short-term goal, what we can think about is maybe a social protection scheme. When we look at the Benazir income support program, I'm just going to give it an example. So there was an example of, I think it was in Sindh, and people who were impacted by drought. Because of the income support program, there were more women who went and got registered because you need an ID card for it. They were getting paid. There were less cases of gender-based violence, domestic violence. The divorce rate decreased. And then, so I think in an urgency, we need social protection programs which protect people when an extreme event happens. But then we also need to sort of change our system. When we talk about water, in Pakistan we know rice is a big crop and we still use flood irrigation system. So we need to also work with farmers, have farmer schools, maybe change techniques. We want a community-led water conservation system. We want drought-resistant crops, reforestation, watershed management, and these things. It's really important to work with the communities, because I work with communities a lot, and they're just in the environment, in the outdoors. Their livelihood depend on it. So maybe they don't know the science jargon, maybe they don't know the exact words, but they are seeing the change in the weather and the climate. So they're doing organically, trying to change things on their own. Yes.
So they're because of course every day they're grappling with this crisis. Thank you so much for being with us. Unfortunately, we have limited time. Munir Saab, thank you for being with us today. Anam, thank you for joining us. Amman Ullah Saab, thank you for being with us today. Overall, of course, as far as Pakistan is concerned, it was ranked as the most climate vulnerable country on the climate risk index of 2025. We potentially, the floods that we had in 2022 caused about more than $30 billion in damages, displaced millions of people. We are still reeling from that kind of damage. We are still reeling from that kind of catastrophe as far as Pakistan as a whole is concerned. And we hope that there are countries, there are international donors, and there are those that will realize and perhaps make a difference to where things are for those countries that are not responsible for it, but are at the other end of bearing the heat, quite literally. Let's hope that we can have that kind of change, and let's hope that we can ourselves make the changes that will make a difference for us, even if little by little. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.